Spain and Andorra, Julissa Reynoso. She's a friend of Global Americans. We're excited to have her. Ambassador Reynoso brings a wealth of experience to our discussion, having held key roles not only in diplomacy, but also in law and policymaking. Her impressive career includes serving as the Chief of Staff to First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. She has been U.S. Ambassador to Uruguay, which is when I met you, and as a partner at the Winston and Straw law firm in New York City. Today, we're set to explore a range of pressing topics with Ambassador Reynoso, from the nuances of U.S.-Spain relations and their collaborative efforts in Latin America to the pivotal dynamics within NATO as we approach this summer's summit in Washington. So we're eager to delve into these discussions and more. And without further ado, let us give a warm welcome to Ambassador Reynoso. Ambassador, the floor is yours to deliver your opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Global Americans team. I'm very happy to be back in this community. I had the honor of being part of Global Americans when I was a private citizen in New York, and contributing, I hope, to the board at that point. And so I'm glad to see it's still vibrant and doing the important work of engaging Latin America, the United States, and the rest of the world on issues that matter to the citizens of the region. As mentioned by Carl, I am the ambassador here. I'm in Madrid. I cover Spain and Andorra. One of the priorities we've had here as a mission has been really attempting to optimize the competitive advantage that the United States and Spain have vis-a-vis their historic and economic and social contacts and roots with the Latin American region and the Caribbean. Because of that, we have used every possible opportunity that's been given to us, both politically, commercially, economically, culturally, educationally, you name it, to try to build bonds, trilateral, if you will, bonds between Latin America, especially the Spanish-speaking world, the United States and Spain. We have created several initiatives, the most kind of vibrant of which is this Central America working group that we started shortly after I arrived in Spain, and it's been fully working on with several agencies of our government, from obviously the State Department, USAID, Homeland Security, the DOD, and others, and the development agencies to promote economic progress and development. Obviously, deal with the challenges of sustainable democratic order and promoting human rights, and the security and law enforcement challenges that are prevalent in many of the countries of the region. Related to that, we've also worked with Spain on promoting what is called legal pathways related to migration. That is, I think, essentially a new point of policy coordination that we also started when I arrived, and which has led to several important initiatives with Spain to promote legal migration from Latin America to Spain, both through initiatives related to labor needs here in Spain, but also migration of folks who are deemed refugees. So it's a very complex and active relationship. I'm very proud of the work we've done here and continue to do with the government of Spain, but also the private sector, which obviously is essential for the economic activity of the region and is very much present, as you all know, the Spanish private sector in Latin America and the Caribbean. We want to continue to support that and grow it as much as possible. So these are some things we're doing here, Carl, for the audience of interest, hopefully to the with the audience. Obviously, we have a lot more going on with Spain related to Europe, the Middle East, Africa. But in terms of Latin America and the world of the Americas, those are some highlights for you.
No, thank you, Julissa. And I want to touch a little bit deeper on the Latin America side. As you know, Global Americans is focused on the region, but the region in the world, right? And you're tasked with strengthening our ties with Spain, but you're also dipping into broader Ibero-American affairs. And I just to dig in there a little bit, why does the U.S. care about engaging with Latin America through Spain? I think a lot of folks understand that because they understand the history, but there's some folks that would say, well, Spain is more focused on, or that relationship is more focused on things like NATO or the EU.
Mhm.
Why LATAM?
Well, there are several parts of the story. There's the history, the colonial history with all its complexities. There is the flow of people between Spain and the Americas. Right now, you have a, a a migration pattern that has hundreds of thousands of Latin Americans coming to Spain, living in Spain. It is Latin American population here. It is the largest migrant population in Spain. Historically, that was not always the case. You had the reverse, which was Spanish people. Historically, during the either economic challenges of Spain or political times where you had civil war, conflict, oppression moving to the region. So there is a history and a reality that ties the people of Spain to Latin America. And that is very much reality today. So you have that component. You have obviously the language, which is, a significant factor in connecting people and citizens and commerce and, affinity. Then you have the economic commercial ties, which are enormous. Besides the United States and in certain countries, obviously the People's Republic of China, Spain is the investor in Spanish companies, and frankly, it's just it's even more relevant because this particular government of Spain, the Spanish presidency under President Sanchez, has made that connection to that the region even more significant. Spain had the presidency of the European Council last year, the last 6 months of 2023, and it made that relationship with Spain, with Latin America, a priority for the European Union. And we saw it with the countless number of meetings, conferences, initiatives that were put forth during that presidency, including the first EU LATAM heads of government meeting that took place in Brussels last year, which was very significant. And in that meeting, there were important announcements, including the investment by the European Union and countries of the European Union in the region. I also have to say, as the United States, Spain is a very much a robust democracy. It's a model for a lot of countries in the world, especially how it's progressed over the last 40, 50 years in terms of rights and protections and opportunities for people. And we work very closely with Spain to promote those values throughout the world, and in Latin America in particular. It's a natural place to work to promote democracy and human rights.
Yep. So this month, and I think you've made it very clear why, in the context of why you're so much of your work, or a lot of your work, has to do with the region. But this month you had the U.S.-Spain Working Group on Central America, and it met in Madrid, and big names like Brian Nichols and Todd Robinson, our
Celebrities.
That's right. Celebrities within state and were accompanying you, and they were in Madrid. And so, can you break down a little bit what went down in those meetings, and what were the hot topics?
So we spoke again. We launched this initiative about 2 years ago. We've had several meetings already. This is the latest. We had a delegation of about, I don't know, 15 people from Washington here, again covering different agencies, led by the Assistant Secretary Brian Nichols, and we focus on the agenda, focus on the issues that I mentioned before, how to make sure that we're coordinating efforts around promoting democracy and human rights. How do we ensure that our foreign policy is focused on a robust, prosperous a robust policy based on economic growth that allows for equity and progress by all citizens? How do we ensure that we're coordinating our work around rule of law and security and citizen safety? So those are some of the things we talked about. Within that, obviously, there are a lot of different, we can be more specific. We obviously spoke about how to coordinate efforts around, again, legal pathways for migration, especially labor migration coming from certain countries that, in the case of Spain, they have very robust interest in promoting circular migration on labor needs here, targeting labor needs. We also spoke about the challenges involved in human rights and democratic order in places like Venezuela, Cuba, obviously Nicaragua, how we can support leaders like the newly elected president of Guatemala, Bernardo Arevalo. And how do we coordinate the development assistance and the investments, the private sector investments going through a multilateral organizations like the Inter-American Development Bank, but also during the EU presidency, of the Spanish EU presidency, there was an announcement about 45 billion euros, 45 billion euros coming from Europe to Latin America via what they call the Global Gateway, which is a platform created by the European Union with the CELAC countries to promote investment and economic activity in the region. So there was a lot and I must say, importantly, we also talked a lot about how to work with Spain and others to ensure that there is a serious, committed, supported multinational presence in Haiti to help the citizens of Haiti get to a better place in terms of their basic security and democratic potential.
Yeah, that it seems like a meeting like that with such sort of
So it was not just about Central America, as you can tell.
right, but it was much broader than that. It
Yeah.
seemed. I mean, talking about Venezuela. I mean, obviously the Guatemala side is one where we as a government have spent a lot of time, and I think it's been spent the right way, because I think it's supporting a situation that needs it, and I think it's boding positively. But you start to see, how broad this relationship is, not just dealing with the issues in this case, right? Of this working group to deal with narcotics issues, right?
Yeah.
It's broader than that.
Yeah.
But let me get on a couple of other issues. So jumping over to, I guess, a different theater, because I think folks are interested in Latin America, and I think you've answered that really well. But let's not forget that your job really focused on the big issues having to do with Europe. And there are so many big issues in Europe right now. The Ukraine war, right, is shaking Europe up. How does that play into the relationship between Spain and the US? Are things getting tighter? Is it causing friction, or are things smooth? How do you see that?
On the Ukraine side, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I mean, how
Carl.
does that conflict affect our relationship, I guess, with Spain, but also Europe broadly, the EU?
Yeah. So we're now over 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine in a violent, illegal manner, and created a real crisis in Europe, in the world. But we're here. That event really triggered a reaction from the European countries and members of NATO that I think we all can be very proud of. Obviously, the Ukrainian people deserve the full credit that they did. I think were more organized, determined, committed to defending their sovereignty than I think, obviously, than the Russians assumed. And we have all collectively been working tirelessly to support that cause. Spain has, like a lot of other European nations, stepped up in a significant manner to provide security assistance to Ukraine. It also, as a member of the European Union, has been very active in ensuring that the EU is providing Ukraine with economic support to keep running a government, to keep operating and being functional. So between the economic, the security support, and obviously the political support with sanctions against political and legal support with sanctions against Russian entities and Russian oligarchs and Russian and supporters of Putin. All of this has been part of the coordinated response by Europe towards that attack. And additionally, Spain has been like I've said about Latin Americans being received here. Over 200,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Spain since the war. And so not only and this is a country that is not near Ukraine, geographically, relative to the rest of the European countries. It's one of the farthest of all. And the fact that so many Ukrainians have come here and settled here and been welcomed here says a lot about the humanitarian and humanitarian commitment by the citizens of Spain in support of those people. So it's been a really impressive response by all of us. Obviously, we have had our own challenges recently in trying to ensure that the United States can keep its commitment to the people of Ukraine and to Europe to keep supporting that effort economically in terms of defense. But the Europeans have really stepped up in a historic manner and in a very coordinated and impressive way. And I think Spain and the rest of Europe should be proud.
Yeah, and indeed. I just want to tell the folks that are watching that they should feel free to pose any questions, suggest any questions. And if we have a little bit of time, we're happy to entertain them. Please identify who you are, and we can use your questions. But let me just stick to this a little bit, Ambassador. So we have a NATO summit where leaders like Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez will be hitting DC. What's on the agenda for that when it comes to Spain and the U.S.? What is it that we're looking for Spain's role to be within NATO and with some of the priorities that we have?
So the summit is in July in Washington. We expect, obviously, the heads of government to all be there in attendance. Spain hosted the NATO summit in 2022. Shortly after the war started in Ukraine. So this is a really important time for NATO and Europe and the allies to really coordinate efforts given all the different threats and challenges we are facing. With respect to Spain, Spain and the rest of the members of NATO have made a commitment years ago to reach a 2% threshold, a target of 2% in terms of defense spending as a percentage of their annual budget. Spain has increased its defense spending dramatically over the last several years, but it has yet to reach the 2% mark. So we are urging Spain to spend more towards the defense and security as a portion of its budget. Spain is one of the most significant contributors within NATO of multinational missions throughout Europe and in other parts of the world. And so we want to ensure that Spain continues to participate in these important missions that allow for countries to feel more secure. That actually is also obviously a mark of great deterrence for future conflict. It also is one of the top. Spain is one of the top trainers within the NATO world. It trains countless numbers of people from other parts of Europe, and so that's also something we want to continue to encourage. So between the spending, the different operations, the multinational missions, we want to continue supporting those priorities. We also want to ensure that NATO is responsive to the challenges of the time, that it is not stuck in days past where warfare and threats were of a certain nature. Of course, we're seeing conflict in a very in conflict in a manner we thought we wouldn't see again. In the case of Ukraine, but there are also new threats. There's cyber threats. There are also obviously manipulation of reality with the artificial intelligence tools are now available to governments. So we want to make sure that NATO is prepared to address those threats in a holistic and coordinated way, in an efficient way. And so given the number of countries that are members of NATO, and we added a couple last year, right, with Sweden and Finland, we want to make sure that that coordination is relevant for the time. In addition, Spain cares deeply about the Mediterranean and what they call the southern flank. Given all the challenges NATO countries are facing in the eastern flank, meaning in what was formerly the Soviet Union, there's been a lot of attention to that part of Europe, but Spain is very much Spain and others, obviously Italy, Greece, are very worried about NATO not paying enough attention to the south, and that is the threats coming from Africa, from the Mediterranean, and that part of the world that, as you know, is also facing a whole lot of challenges.
Yeah, there's
so I'm sure that's going to be part of the discussion as well. Sorry.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, but there's one thing that you talk about that I think, I just want to probe a little bit more, across Europe, and I guess the movement of people is also an issue within NATO, right? So, and you talked about trying to make sure that NATO stays, consistent with today's threats or today's issues, right? So across Europe, we're seeing a rise in far-right parties, often fueled by their views on migration issues. What do you think we can do to work with nations like Spain to bolster democracy and arguments that would be, I guess, to inform some of these concerns that more extreme narratives are conveying on issues like migration?
Yeah, that's obviously that's not only an issue Europe is having to grapple with. We're seeing that in many parts of the world, and obviously also our own country. Yeah. A lot of this has to do with education and information, and how much we're all doing, and the government obviously plays a role in ensuring that information is being vetted, that there's a manner by which the truth and the facts can be really at the forefront of information. We got to work with the private sector to make sure that's the case. We obviously also have to ensure that agents, and there are foreign agents obviously as well involved in this exercise, that are intending to manipulate order, manipulate democratic processes and democratic thinking and liberties are penalized and are held accountable for targeting countries that are democratic and are pursuing progress, like in the case of Spain and in the United States. So that is one of the challenges of our time, is how to ensure we can detect and hold accountable agents and people who are behind these organized efforts to promote misinformation and distort reality and facts with the objective of causing chaos and disrupting our democracies.
We just received a question from Ivan Rebolledo, president of our board here at Global Americans. He
Yes.
says, well, besides saying hello, it's great to
Uh-huh.
have you. He's asking if you can further expand on the Global Gateway Initiative. Can you share with us how this initiative is coordinating with the Americas Partnership for Economic Prosperity, APEC?
Yes, thank you, Ivan, and good to hear from you via Carl. The Global Gateway Initiative is an effort by the European Union and the member states to promote greater economic investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. Spain took the leadership role in this regard, but obviously there are other countries with significant investments in the region and with the intent to do more. Part of what the European Union is doing, as far as I understand it, is trying to track these investments and ensure that they're actually having an impact. And Spain is taking the leadership role. There are folks within the government of Spain whose work is to ensure that there is these investments are actually getting to where they need to get, and working with governments in Latin America, the CELAC countries, to allow for a seamless process as possible to hit the target of the economic investments. With our APEP, as you mentioned, which is one of the White House initiatives to promote economic activity as well, working with countries that are like-minded, that it is a similar initiative as far as I understand it. I think in the case of the Global Gateway, it is obviously many countries, some obviously much more relevant than others in terms of investment in the region. You're really looking at United States, Spain, Italy, Portugal, France, Germany, and the like, taking leadership in pursuing these investment opportunities within individually, but obviously coordinated with the European Union. And in the case of our initiative, it's really U.S. led, and working with private sector and industry to ensure that the resources get to the right place. We're obviously working also with the development banks, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, to make sure there is the DFC, our own development agencies, to make sure these private sector interests and economic initiatives actually get to those countries and generate economic activity and employment. So they're very much, I think there's a lot of parallel. Right now they're not talking to each other, frankly. Part of my work here is to make sure at least the Spanish component of that is talking to the United States. But at the general level, these are two separate priorities, projects, policy initiatives that more or less have the same goal in mind, which is to generate economic progress and prosperity in these countries.
Yeah, I mean, these efforts in, I think, in a challenging environment, Ambassador, I think are sort of, I think, progress insofar as the potential that they can have. I mean, we're in a situation, as you know, where the model of getting free trade agreements, as we did for some time, is becoming so challenging and so difficult to get anything through Congress, that when you have efforts like these, it helps sort of promote things in the right direction. Obviously, these things would be better if they were codified, but I think we're working with the possible and not working with the perfect. But I hear you. Let me ask you another question. One of our um, staff here at Global Americans is from Uruguay and has fond memories
Cool.
of you and your time there. And he says his name is Alejandro Trenchi, and he says you've
Okay.
been ambassador to Uruguay. Now it's been 10 years since you left the region. With more perspective now, how do you see Latin America today? How do you see Uruguay and how do you see Latin America today?
Oh boy, that's a hard question. I haven't. I've been away for a while from Uruguay. I don't have all the facts, but it seems to be doing well. I mean, thankfully Uruguay was always kind of a beacon of hope in a complicated part of the world. Um, and there continues to be, in my view, a whole lot of uh, dialogue between the different parties, the different political wings, if you will, of the electoral process, and folks are quite active in their democracy, which is always a good sign in Uruguay. And economically, it seems to be doing okay, especially given how well it seems to have managed the pandemic response. So that's my sense from looking from afar and not really being obviously in Uruguay or following Uruguay as closely as I was. I have enough work here just following what's going on in Spain. And the rest of the region, as you know, Carl, and the rest of the folks on this line, it's complicated. You got some places that you feel hope, right? Like, okay, things are going in the right direction. It's never easy, but then your heart breaks when you hear about what's going on in Haiti again. You know what I mean? So these are things that you wish just would just be more linear in terms of progress. Uh, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. You kind of you wonder how we're gonna see some form of uh, democratic uh, condition, if you will, in Nicaragua. That's another place that you're like forgot. You wonder how is that ever gonna evolve for the better. Um, and in the case of Venezuela, with the mass migration, the people who are living everywhere and anywhere, it's really heartbreaking. And in the case of Cuba, you just wonder how did they get this bad?
Yeah, yeah,
So
and
I don't. That
no,
sounds pretty depressing.
and
But in
that
other
no,
places,
but I
it's
think
better.
it's a balance. No, Ambassador, I think
Uh,
it's a balanced sort of representation. There are positives and there are challenges, and as you well put, and
yeah.
I think we have time for two more questions. One of the questions I just received from another member of our board, from Victor
Mm,
Sierra, and he
yeah.
says, hello, and
Hi.
he's excited that you're here. But he asks, there have been in the past, there have been a number of Venezuelan OFAC sanctioned individuals living in Spain. He said
Uh-huh.
he asks, is the U.S. working with Spain on prosecuting some of these actors as well as others that are on the run?
Well, yeah. Hi, Victor. I can tell you without getting into specifics, because you got ongoing investigations. You can't really get into specifics. We have a tremendous law enforcement uh, cooperation here with the Spanish authorities. Um, we've had very high profile, during my time, very high profile individuals of Venezuelan origin that have been extradited to the United States, with obviously with the assistance of the Spanish government, and we have many other folks that are here in facing charges that we have helped working with Spain to ensure that the facts and the law are applied properly to those individuals. So I think we're doing well. There's always obviously more we can do. Remember that we have to have jurisdiction. It's not always easy when you're talking about foreigners and people who are good at breaking the law. But I'm happy to report that with the Spanish authorities, we have a we have a model partner when it comes to law enforcement.
Excellent. And this, I mean, you've been so gracious with your time, Ambassador, but I just want to ask you one last question.
You
Again,
always say that.
question.
Last question.
Last question, for sure. So Spain has been an important partner for Ecuador in its security crisis, right? Serving as the European side of the transnational policing effort against narcotics cartels. How is Spain working with other countries in the region on crime issues? Are we encouraging them to work with us and with other countries in the region on some of these issues?
Yes. So Spain has a good answer. Spain has police presence, cooperation, coordination efforts on law enforcement in several countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. We obviously here in Spain physically have law enforcement cooperation with the different components of our law enforcement agency world. And frankly, we see a lot of illicit trafficking and organized crime, from obviously drug trafficking to human trafficking and the like, coming from Latin America and the Caribbean. How do we how do our agents and the Spanish do their job is really coordinating and working with serious partners in the region that help them uh, get the facts and follow these individuals and ensure that they're properly brought to justice. So there's a lot of coordination. Part of our efforts with these dialogues that we've been talking about and mentioned is to make sure there's more. Frankly, not only with Latin America, but also other parts of the world. That's what it usually takes, is to there's a lot also going from Latin America to Africa now that's ending up in Spain. So we have to ensure that there's that geographic reality is also addressed properly with our efforts. And Spain increasingly has a presence in several African countries that are worried about the trafficking coming from the Latin American region. So it's much more elaborate and evolving. These bad actors are very agile and creative, and they go in geography. You hit them in one part of, you can stop them here and they move somewhere else. So we just have to continue that work. But sadly, these challenges are ever present.
Excellent. Well, as I mentioned, that was my last question.
Oh,
And I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time. I know that, I think your job is so dynamic in that you have what you're doing in Europe and representing us in Europe so well, and also with an eye on what's happening between that relationship between Europe and Latin America, where I think you have incredible knowledge and experience as well. So I'm just happy that you had the time to chat with us, and
thank you.
I hope we can continue having these opportunities with you. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl, and good seeing everyone remotely. And I hope to see you all again in person or in this with Global Americans. So thank you.
We do too. We do too. Thank you so much.